Okay. Um, in the report for March, there were about five distinct subjects that were covered. And Michael has at times criticized me for not covering the report. So I'm trying to do that and do that in order. So the first one is CPI, a new kind of inflation, employment reversals after several monthly gains, foreign exchange, time to buy but not US dollars, overhead costs, and sourcing, not purchasing. What I had on CPI and a new kind of inflation, and probably everybody has seen it, that the price for new cars has soared. Here's one of the reasons. Now, you may recall in the report that February CPI was 1.8%. And in previous month report, they estimated that product superstition substitution could probably lower that by 0.25 or zero point 0.3. Right? So pretty low in February. I wouldn't hold my breath that it's going to be very low in March, but with the gas prices. But Reuters did a study and they came up with a piece that I thought was pretty interesting. I'm not a marketing guru or anything like that. And what they looked at is that who is buying the cars? And what they came from, and this does go back to 2018, that people who a family, a household earning 250,000, where it was about 4% of the market for cars, it's now up around 21%. And people making less than 100,000 used to be about 61% were buying new cars, is down to 38%. And if you looked at the average transaction price across automakers' lines, you can see how the price of the cars have gone up. But they make the point that it's not inflation that's doing this, it's the marketing. Right? They're marketing, people want higher price cars. Even though they may complain, that's what they're buying. Because you look up, and these two charts are US, but Canada is pretty close. It has an average new car price of 63,000 and a used at 35,000. So if you look at that, but I took a look at the other. There is a Nissan Versa which was $22,000 Canadian. It's out in the market to buy, plus all the incidentals, of course. But people are making a decision to pay more to get more on the car. Right? In fact, this model in their highest end fully loaded is like 24,000. Now, you pay $35,000 for a used car or $25,000 for a brand new car with full warranty. Uh, People are making that decision. In fact, last year, Hyundai had a car out for 18,000. They stopped it because nobody was buying it. You sit and scratch your head. Now, this isn't captured by CPI because CPI uses specific cars and models and quantities. And they only make changes every uh, from 3 months to 3 years if they would switch a car for another one. One reason is it's no longer available. So that isn't captured in there. So I think if you're a marketer, is to kind of wonder and say, well, should we really be looking at pushing prices down or pushing prices up, or I guess both. Obviously, in the higher end costs, there's a higher margin. Employment reversal after several monthly gains. As employment was down 0.4%, unemployment was up 0.2%. But if you look at a breakdown in the core age, which is 25 to 54 years old, it's not great, but it's not that bad. What's hurt is youth 15 to 24 years old. Now, I try to find out and say, well, maybe they went back to school, maybe they just, and that's a possibility. Stats Canada shows all sorts of ways they come up with these numbers, but it clearly points that the top level number isn't describing what the potential problem is. This one I liked. Foreign exchange, time to buy, but not US dollars. And as I started out, this is the one I like. I was dealing in foreign exchange for years. February 2026, the US dollar to Canadian exchange rate hovered around, well, using what we do in Canada, 0.735 to 73 range. By the way, everybody else in the world would use 1.36, which makes auditing outside Canada a little difficult, especially like I did one time and give everybody the numbers backwards. But what Canada has, and it's fairly balanced, is that people are moving to US dollars as a safe haven. Right? So there's the demand for the US dollars. But Canada has oil to sell. And though the contract may be in US dollars, when they get to Canada, they're converted for Canadian. So you have a demand for Canadian dollars due to oil, and you have a demand for US. So that exchange rate is kind of sitting there rather stable. But if you take a look at other countries who don't have oil, they don't have that balance, and they're dropping against the US dollar. Now, the US, when I say US dollar, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's a confidence in the US economy. Many Euro bonds, both government and corporate and so forth, and other countries are denominated in US dollars. So it's not necessarily the US economy. They're kind of separate, kind of. So the thing is I talked in a previous report, is looking at currency options. If you're buying something from Japan, will the Japanese company take yen rather than US dollars, or have an option to take US dollars? It can be beneficial for both parties. Anyway, I thought if you're looking at it and wondering why kind of the Canadian, but look at the other currencies, you'll see more that they're dropping more. Overhead, which was the main push or the main subject of the report. Overhead is one of the most powerful and often underestimated drivers of profit margin compression in 2026. Will be. Energy and good costs exploded in 2022, but quickly retreated by mid-2023 as fuel prices normalize and supply chains finally cleared. Overhead costs didn't budge. Overhead costs follow service inflation and in many cases continue to rise. The overhead cost structure, primarily wage-driven, is slow to unwind and locked in through multi-year contracts. They had an article on Audi in 2025, overhead-related cost pressures, including tariffs, fixed cost discipline challenges, contributed to a 14% drop in operating profits. I guess we could translate, but that would be a very big number and really piss off shareholders. So overhead costs. To take a look at it is, if you look at a typical overhead share of revenue, now this is gross revenue. So manufacturers, their overhead takes 20 to 35% of gross revenues to cover. Professional services, 40 to 60, retail, 25 to 40, tech and systems, 30 to 50%. That is a big chunk, yet we seem to always talk about product prices rather than the overhead of running the business as we do it. I would suggest, though, if you're doing lawyers or accountants or consultants, audit the invoice very closely. In my time in strategic sourcing, we found one individual over a 12-month period, and they had been charging him out at 4 different rates, somewhere from like $50 to $120, depending on the title they gave him when he did the consulting job. They quickly gave us our money back. Those guys are really interesting. If you want some flexibility there, just tell them you're going to tell your friends about it. And they'll quickly go, how much do you want? Now, interest rate, business loans. This is a good example of what happened with commodities. And of course, the actual commercial lending rate varied by collateral, credit quality, and relationship. The trend is unmistakable. Borrowing costs began to ease in 2024. So you had in there, started out at, by coincidence, 4.42% on business loans and ended last November at 4.42. But they were up in 23 to 707, so forth. Non-commercial mortgages, you can see, fairly followed the same curve most of the time. Right? The only thing, mortgages are funded by in the bond market, and the bond market is influenced by prime and the rest of them. It does have fluctuations from prime rate increases. But I think one of the things is, as with suppliers, banks rarely lead with their most competitive pricing. I found after, 35 years in banking that a lot of people looked at banks more like governments than businesses. And they're not. Meaningful savings often emerge only when the clients create competitive tensions or signal credible switching risk. I've seen many customers, some for rather sizable, didn't even ask what the interest rate. They were just happy we were going to give them the money. And I kind of, maybe your accountant wants to look at this. So let's see if you are in interest on mortgages in the real estate is they're one of the prime drivers or their highest cost. So let's see what happened in there. Oh, if you look at that, uh, industrial buildings and warehouse index, which is the green, this is over the same period. Now, obviously, there's some tariffs and wars and so forth. It's a little easier to see, though, on the next slide. Their borrowing costs and commercial rent and leases. That should be interest rates. I added that this morning. I guess my hand was shaking. So interest rates are down. Vacancy rates are up. So why is it going up? And I found in my work when I was in strategic sourcing, it's often you have a perception in the back of your mind and you work with that. And no matter what, I think everybody on the call knows they don't know you. Your clients don't know your costs. So when the Canadian industrial warehouse vacancy rates are rising, okay, but they're as high as 6.3% in early 2026. Historically, they were around 2%, which is a tight market, but it's a pretty loose market. But how the rates are still going up. Transportation indexes, trucking 6 to 12%. There's a lot of different kinds of trucking, of course. Rail 14 to 15, and it's kind of controlled because there's so few providers. But couriers 13 to 26%. Obviously, we know kind of why is because home delivery and so forth is a big item right now. But a few hints on there. Benchmark against current market frequently. Both often go out and get pricing for somebody and you like working for them and so on and so forth. Their price may creep up or the market may drop down. Keep a close eye. Right size the service level. Many companies pay for speed they don't need. And I might say one thing too is audit or try and audit your couriers because you may pay for a very fast delivery, but you never got it. But how do you know that? They don't really show you a good report for that. You have to contact the receiver. Consolidate volumes intelligent, combine deliveries by geography, customer type, or time window. And really the time window is looking at the delivery time and kind of working. What am I trying to do? And people often throw everything at a courier and let them figure it out. Could cost you quite a bit of money. And the other one is use multiple delivery channels. When I was looking at one too, is for people to check is the bank had a special courier which ran from Montreal to London to New York, back to Montreal, and kept going around. When I looked at it, it was set up primarily to process checks, okay, from those branches in those locations. Quickly found out that this special courier we had, after a few years, every courier was doing that timetable. I didn't have to pay these guys a premium. Uh, I also asked a friend of mine in New York to go in and see what was in the package. It was just supposed to be checks. The thing was weighted down. Everybody says, "Oh, that's going to New York. Throw it in." It was like we were sending reams of copy paper overnight to New York. Uh, so many pieces in there.
So Bob, those percents that you're showing there, what do they represent?
They are the indexes for it, which means it's I talked about before that the index and the price of oil rarely coincide. All right. Uh, this is actually coming from what the invoicing truckers are invoicing, the rail is invoicing, and carriers are invoicing. Couriers are invoicing. Okay, it's not the price. Uh, so that's the cost has gone up because you can always look at it, and everyone knows this, but it's often it's not their priority. Is that uh, these costs are smaller than other costs usually, so they don't get the big priority. But they have to be managed rather quickly when you rather often because it takes a huge chunk out of your bottom line. Uh, so those are things, and what I was saying about what their costs are. Um, I couldn't believe when I got in negotiating a large contract with a big courier that how low they could go. I wonder. I sat there and go, these guys are going to go out of business. But they happily took the business. The point here is all of these are kind of hourly rates. Most companies have employees that are in that area. And you said, okay, so your service provider is hitting on these as well. But when you look at the rates and so forth, granted, it's over 3 years, they really aren't out of line, with the exception of legal services, which is support services. You obviously can't get a lawyer for $34 an hour, but even a bad one costs more than that. But kind of reasonable. You look at couriers, and if you think back to, let me go back. Uh, Oops. Couriers, 13 to 26% of the index. Okay. But the guys only got 8%. So something's happened there. Somebody's making money. I thought was one of the best is that when I was in Seoul, Korea, the manager of another branch said, I think I'm overpaying my driver. I go, what? He says, well, when my driver drops me off, his driver picks him up. So his driver picked him up when he was finished. Maybe he's overpaying. All right, sourcing. And I was in strategic sourcing. I was trained by A.T. Kearney uh, for almost a year. I think it was a total of 3 years I was in there. And I had something to do with one day I saved a bunch of money and the EVP wanted me in this group to work with them. But it took a month or so to understand, and the process is fairly simple. Um, and but sourcing services is fundamentally different from purchasing products. When you buy products, you typically know exactly what you need. specifications are fixed, comparable, and quality is fairly easy to measure. Instead of a single defined item, you are evaluating a multi-component delivery model. In effect, you're purchasing a coordinated system of deliverables that must operate together to create value. Now, the steps, you can find them on there are a whole bunch of consultants out there and so forth. I was surprised they came up with the same number of steps. The first one is just introduction and background. Two is just really expanding on that. If you're going to do a good comparison of RFI or RFP, you need to have kind of standards that you want to make so you can do a proper evaluation. And supplier qualifications. I learned more going around visiting all these people than ever before. I walked into a large courier company, one of the several big guys. And the first thing you saw was a big cage with a whole bunch of boxes torn apart. I asked them what it was. Oh, those are the parcels we can't deliver. And I kind of looked at the guy and said, are you trying to sell me this service or get me to run home? Like, even if if the other guys have it. Where another courier, I was sitting in with the president of Canada, and he had a picture window looking into the sorting facility. And during our conversation, he picks up the phone and says, there's a box by lane 16. What is it? And why is it there? Really different companies. So going through that, the appendix is a lot more details. You want a detailed proposal as possible. But the trick is number one. What is your real objective here? And I went down to Detroit one time, just an example. It's hard. It almost blows your mind at times. And one of the couriers, I'm probably going to let slip who I ended up going with, took on one of the automotive people. And they were having trouble getting parts to their dealerships across the US overnight, which was their objective is you don't want the car sitting on the hoist waiting for parts for 2 or 3 days. So they put together a process. But in the gist, what happened in kind of the conclusion is that the automobile company had forced parts manufacturers in the Detroit area to pay for the delivery to their sorting facility. And they thought that was big saving. Okay, we don't have to pay for all those trucks coming in, dropping off parts. These guys, and they were outside consultants to a huge company, said, no, we're going to pick them up. And we're going to pick them up 4 or 5 times a day so we can start sorting at 10 o'clock in the morning instead of 5 o'clock at night. And they, of course, upgraded the systems and so forth. I talked to one of the consultants who was still actually there babysitting the system. And he said the first day, okay, he said it came around 6 o'clock and somebody came into his office and said, we're finished. He goes, what do you mean you're finished? Well, we've got all the parts. They're all packaged. They're all in the beehive and ready to go to the airplanes. And he says, really? Have any idea what we're going to do with the night shift? So it was just somebody thought about it a little differently. And some of these were small parts. Some of them were, there was one I saw in there was a Hemi motor. delivered the next day. You kind of wonder about it. And something actually Mike and I were talking about before is looking at different products. Is it a product or is it a service? And you kind of scratch your head at times. Yeah, well, so couriers, I spent a lot of time on couriers. If you can imagine, what did we have? We had like, when I was at the bank doing this, 3,000 branches, uh, stuff around the world. So you look at the big guys. FedEx has 376 airplanes. UPS 295. But UPS has more trucks than FedEx. And Amazon has 110 airplanes, okay, but more trucks than anybody else. And you kind of wonder about it. Now, I started off in there going is, what does a banker know about logistics? I have to say, not very much. But I had a 13 to $20 million spend. So I basically went to a whole bunch of them and said, educate me. Just for reference, Air Canada has 222 airplanes. Right. Systems and controls, these different things I went through. I went into their control room out by Pearson Airport. And one room looked like it was something from NASA. And low lights, screens all over the place, and so forth. And I go, wow, do you control all the airplanes from here? And the guy said, no, this is trucks. Okay. That old lady in the corner over there, she controls the airplanes. And she just had a desk and a phone. But hey, you're focused on what's important to your business. Okay. The airplanes fly. And if you can look at how they all put this together, I was amazed. I went out a couple mornings when the airplanes were coming in, and you'd hear such and such an airplane will be landing in 3 minutes. All right. And right at 3 minutes, all these doors open and all these trucks are backing up to the distribution thing, which was fully automated. And things went well. Okay. And I thought, yeah, it's pretty impressive. But then it had, as this big plane is leaving their sorting facility, they go, follow-up airplane is coming in, 6 minutes. And what it was is that plane had, the first one took off on time, landed on time, but they didn't have everything on it. So they got a second plane following it 6 minutes behind. And you go, wow, impressive. But after looking at it closer again, those big guys didn't really take care of my problems. Right? I had one building here in Toronto. There were 600 printers and copiers in that building. Right? Just us. Think of the paper, toner, maintenance, stationery, and storage to keep that going. And that is not cheap real estate. Right? And of course, you can think about this. How many elevators have you got in and shared it with about 10 messengers? Right? And the bank itself, all the offices, there were 17,000 printers and copiers across Canada. First of all, you go, oh, what do I do with this? Right? But there was a way to go. Some of the buildings started paying ball with us and opening up their delivery place early or late or 24 hours. One of them said, "There's no way I'm not going to do that." And it was, being a bank is very helpful. And I said, "Well, I would talk to the owners because we have a very large mortgage with them. We may not own this building, but we hold the mortgage." So it actually took, the best piece I got to run was a one-off person, okay, who had worked for a previous courier company, recognized the problem, and he took it on. So he had a courier company which we called the Vertical Courier Company. And that's all he and his people did. Everybody dropped off at his place, or if they were told to, and they moved everything up and down on very efficiently. Now, the other is Fastest Across the World. If you really want to move, there are companies who will have people sit on the airplane and take an envelope around the world for you. I used them out of Singapore one time. And the guy took the envelope, got on the plane, flew to Toronto, got 2 signatures, got back on a plane, flew to New York, got a couple more signatures, got on a plane and flew back to Singapore. I think it was around $20,000 it cost me for that movement, but I saved $200,000 in interest. Now the big guys couldn't do that, and the big guys didn't seem to be able to do the building part either. So it's kind of looking at it and saying, what is the real objective here? Like I said in the previous, introduction and background is really the key here, is what is the final objective? That sorting facility in Detroit, their objective was to get everything out same day, which they rarely did. What the real objective had to be is overnight delivery to the dealership, so they can get the car off the hoist. That's the objective. Now let's work from there. So I guess the biggest thing I learned working for 3 years in there is that in strategic sourcing, you can call it what you want, is really getting that first point across. I had a courier come in, or a trucking company come in, and I went over and discussed what the RFP was and so forth. And he left, and then he called me. He says, "Can I come back and talk to you?" And I said, "Sure." And he said, "I'm going to bring a consultant with me." And when they came back in, I went over a bit of what I was looking for. And the sales guy turned to the consultant and said, "See, he wants us to tell him what to do." It really makes a difference there. So you're not instructing the supplier on how to perform the work. You're asking them to design the solution by applying their own systems, process, and management discipline. Success depends on creating a relationship where your commercial model and the delivery model can be shaped together. Okay? Sourcing services, certainly for me, was a learning experience. The service sector operates differently from goods, different drivers, different processes. Many providers offer broader capabilities that are immediately visible. UPS, what is big? Fender guitars? Fender. They actually have a service that when they ship them from the US to, I think it's Amsterdam, that they retune the guitar after it arrives in Amsterdam. It's kind of amazing. It's going, whoa, I would never have thought of that. Big thing is stay open to their suggestions. Most will try to, of course, win all your business by bundling services for the strongest overall price. Uh, One of the things I was even shocked when some people walked in, we were looking at how to service the ATMs, which had always been a problem of how to keep them full of money and the right denominations. And there was an American company that had systems and processes and so forth. And they walked in and said, listen, we'll buy all your ATMs, which was about 7,000 at that time. We'll run the data lines, we'll own the cash inside it, and we'll charge you per transaction. And I had to help some of the IT people that were there with me off the floor going, what? Uh, you never know, and you never know what you're going to learn when they come up with suggestions. And you hit on the right guy and you go, really? Anyway, I guess my whole push was looking at overhead and spending more time verifying invoices and sourcing it, which in the case of the ATM, they said, we have to control all parts or we can't make it all work. Okay. You're going to have friction between different companies. Can one company do it and eliminate that friction? So, anyway, and this is one thing I asked Sam today, or the second, is distribution a product or a service? Is a printer a product or a service? As I was saying to Mike, and I asked Sam, he was on earlier, and he had been in printers for quite a few years, and he had to think about it. Is it a product or a service? Basically, it depends how you do it. If you can look at it like a service and think about it, your objectives may change. That's it. Where are we? 9:47. I was afraid I wouldn't have enough. Any questions, comments? Nobody? I don't know how much the bank paid A.T. Kearney, but now they did a lot of presentation, a lot of training, but I kind of summarized it in one slide. But it for me, you can see it's a lot, can be a lot of fun once you get into it. Mind blowing. Well,
Yeah, we'll have to do a follow-up and find out how much overhead costs have been changing with our members, our type of
yeah,
businesses, but
people don't put a lot of pressure on there. I remember one company that came in and we were up on, I don't know, 40th floor or something like that. And they go, well, how low do you want our price to go? And I said, my objective, I said, come on over to the window, is I don't want your price to these other guys to be lower than mine. I'm a bank. I make money lending money. Okay. Not off having a lower cost for paper clips. But I'm also not going to be, I can't compete on loans if I'm paying more over here. I have to put up my loans because that's my revenue. So,
all right.
that,
Well, thanks, Bob. I think there was a lot of good information there as always. So our next webinar, I believe, is going to take place on April 24th And the report usually comes out a week, week and a half to 2 weeks prior to that. So
Okay.
look for that in your emails, everyone. And we wish you a good rest of the day and weekend, and look forward to talking to you guys in the future. So take care,
Thanks so
everyone.
much, guys. Have a good weekend.
Cheers. You too.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.